The courtroom was unusually quiet that morning, as if the air itself was holding its breath. People were filing in slowly, some taking their seats with nervous shuffles, others whispering softly to one another. Cameras from local news outlets were already positioned in the back, their lenses trained on the front of the room, capturing every detail. It was a day that many had been waiting for, a high-profile case involving serious allegations against law enforcement officers. The energy in the room was tense but expectant, and everyone seemed to know that what was about to happen could make history in its own small way. At the center of it all sat the judge, a woman whose presence alone demanded attention. She had earned her position through years of dedication, hard work, and countless sacrifices. There was a calm authority about her, the kind that didn't need to shout or make grand gestures to be felt. When she spoke, people listened, not just because of her title, but because of the quiet confidence and wisdom behind her words. Her eyes scanned the courtroom, taking in every face, and for a moment it seemed like nothing could distract her from the task at hand. The case she was presiding over was emotionally charged. Allegations of misconduct by a police officer had already stirred public debate and heated conversations in the community. People had opinions before the trial even started, and many were waiting to see justice done. The courtroom was packed not only with those directly involved in the case, but also with curious onlookers, journalists, and community members who wanted to witness the proceedings firsthand. The atmosphere was a mix of anticipation, tension, and quiet curiosity. As she began her opening remarks, the room seemed to lean in closer. Her voice was steady, clear, and deliberate, every word chosen with care. She spoke about the importance of fairness, the responsibility of the court, and the principle that everyone, regardless of status or position, must be held accountable under the law. Her words carried weight, and for a moment it felt like the entire room was listening not just with their ears but with their hearts. Then, without warning, a disturbance broke the rhythm. One of the officers assigned to the courtroom, a man whose reputation for bluntness preceded him, stepped forward. He spoke in a tone that was far too casual for a courtroom, questioning the judge's authority in a way that made people shift uncomfortably in their seats. His words were sharp, and there was an undercurrent in his voice that suggested he thought he was in a position to challenge her openly. The sudden interruption made a few people in the gallery gasp quietly, and the air, already thick with tension, seemed to grow heavier. The officer didn't seem to notice the way the room went still. He continued asking pointed questions and making remarks that felt unnecessarily provocative. Some of the spectators exchanged worried glances, unsure how the judge would respond. Others sat in stunned silence, trying to process what they were witnessing. It was a moment that could have easily escalated into chaos, but there was a sense that everyone knew this judge was not someone who would be easily intimidated. She paused, lifting her hand slightly as if to remind everyone, including the officer, that she was still in control. Her expression remained calm, though there was a subtle intensity in her eyes that suggested she had not yet fully revealed the depth of her resolve. The courtroom waited, holding its collective breath. In that moment, it was clear that this was more than just a legal proceeding. It was a test of character, authority, and courage. The judge addressed the officer directly, her voice firm but measured. She reminded him of courtroom protocol, the importance of respect, and the rules that governed everyone present, regardless of uniform or title. She didn't raise her voice or resort to anger. Instead, she relied on clarity, reason, and the undeniable weight of her position. Every word she spoke seemed to ripple through the room, drawing attention not only from the officer but from the jury, the attorneys, and the spectators alike. It was a tense standoff, brief but charged with meaning. The officer, who had clearly expected compliance or at least hesitation, found himself facing a calm authority he had not anticipated. His confident posture wavered slightly, and the slight falter in his tone suggested that he was beginning to realize this was not a situation he could dominate. Meanwhile, the spectators sensed the shift in power. What had started as a potential disruption was now a moment that highlighted the judge's command and the respect she had earned. The gallery was silent, save for the occasional shuffle of feet or the quiet scribbling of notes. Every eye was on the interaction at the front of the room. Journalists instinctively leaned forward, sensing that they were witnessing more than just a courtroom exchange. They were witnessing a story unfold in real time, one that spoke to larger issues of authority, respect, and accountability. Some members of the public felt a rush of pride, quietly impressed by the judge's composure and professionalism. Others felt a mixture of tension and curiosity, wondering how the situation would resolve. For the judge, the interruption was a challenge she had likely encountered in different forms throughout her career. She had faced skeptics, critics, and even overtly hostile behavior before, but this moment required a particular combination of patience, tact, and firmness. She understood that reacting emotionally could escalate the situation and potentially undermine the authority of the court. Instead, she chose to respond in a way that was controlled, deliberate, and effective, ensuring that the courtroom remained focused on the legal matters at hand. The officer, on the other hand, seemed increasingly aware that his assumptions about control and authority were being challenged. His attempts to assert dominance became less confident as the judge maintained her composure. There was a subtle but noticeable shift in the energy of the room. Where tension had been tight and nervous, a new layer of respect began to emerge, not necessarily from him, but from everyone watching. The judge's calm firmness was a quiet demonstration of power, one that didn't rely on shouting or aggression but on knowledge, experience, and unwavering professionalism. In the back of the courtroom, the jury members observed everything carefully. Some exchanged brief, almost imperceptible looks, while others kept their focus entirely on the front. Even without speaking, they were registering every word, tone, and gesture. Their presence was a silent reminder to the officer and to the room that justice was being watched closely. This wasn't just about a personal confrontation. It was about upholding the integrity of the entire legal system. As the judge continued speaking, she steered the courtroom back to the matter at hand. She didn't dwell on the interruption, but she subtly reaffirmed her authority and the seriousness of the proceedings. Her focus returned to explaining the process, the expectations, and the principles that would guide the trial. In doing so, she reminded everyone present why her role mattered and why respect for the courtroom was essential. People in the gallery began to relax slightly, drawn into the rhythm of her words. The initial shock of the interruption had passed, replaced by a growing admiration for her calm handling of the situation. Even those who had come with skepticism or doubt found themselves quietly impressed. The judge's ability to maintain focus and command respect without resorting to anger or hostility was a lesson in itself, demonstrating that true authority doesn't need to be loud. It needs to be consistent, fair, and unwavering. By the time the opening remarks concluded, the atmosphere in the courtroom had transformed. What had started as a moment of tension and potential conflict had become a demonstration of dignity, professionalism, and quiet power. The officer, though still present, was noticeably subdued, and the spectators were fully attentive, aware that they had just witnessed a defining moment. The judge had set the tone for the trial, showing that no interruption or challenge could undermine the seriousness of the proceedings or the principles she upheld. Outside the courtroom, news crews were already preparing their reports, capturing the significance of the morning's events. Social media posts and messages were starting to circulate, sharing snippets of what had happened and the judge's composed response. People discussed the event in hushed tones, reflecting on the courage and authority it took to handle such a situation gracefully. It became clear to everyone following the story that this was more than just a courtroom incident. It was a powerful statement about respect, professionalism, and integrity. As the trial continued into the day, the initial tension gradually gave way to a focused examination of the case itself. But the first moments, the unexpected interruption, the calm authority of the judge, and the room's reaction remained a defining memory for those present. They would remember it not because of any drama or shouting, but because of the quiet strength that had been displayed. It was a reminder that in moments of challenge, patience, clarity, and unwavering confidence could turn a potential confrontation into a lesson in leadership and respect. The judge's calm handling of the situation set the stage for the rest of the trial. Everyone in the courtroom, from the attorneys to the spectators, understood that decorum, fairness, and respect were not optional. They were essential. The tension that had hung over the room at the beginning was replaced by a sense of order and expectation. People were now fully aware that this trial was not just about the case at hand. It was about principles, about authority, and about the courage to maintain dignity in the face of challenge. Even the officer, who had initially thought he could disrupt or challenge the proceedings, now seemed to grasp the reality of the situation. His presence, once imposing, became a quiet reminder of the difference between assumed authority and earned respect. The judge's response had subtly but unmistakably reminded everyone that authority rooted in knowledge, integrity, and fairness could never be shaken by arrogance or impulsive behavior. By the end of that first part of the day, the courtroom had already etched the moment into the minds of everyone present. People would talk about it for days, reflecting on how a simple pause, a measured word, or a calm presence could carry more weight than any gesture of aggression or dominance. It was a testament to the power of professionalism, the importance of respect, and the strength of character in the face of unexpected challenges. The tension in the courtroom didn't end with the judge's calm response. If anything, it seemed to grow stronger. The officer who had interrupted earlier, now standing near the front, looked uncomfortable, his initial confidence fading into something more uneasy. It was clear he hadn't expected the judge to respond with such authority. Every move she made, every word she spoke reminded him, and everyone watching, that the court was not a place for arrogance or intimidation. Yet he stayed, lingering as if hoping the situation would somehow turn in his favor. Though the energy of the room was now clearly against him, the judge turned back to the case, but it was impossible for anyone present to ignore the awkward presence of the officer. He muttered under his breath, clearly frustrated, and tried to justify his earlier behavior, but his voice was low enough that only those closest could hear. Observers in the courtroom exchanged glances, sensing that he was grasping at control that had already slipped away. The jury, however, sat attentively, their eyes never leaving the judge. They had witnessed the beginning of the trial in an entirely unexpected way, one that had set a tone of respect, fairness, and authority that would not be easily broken. The judge's gaze swept across the courtroom once again, briefly acknowledging each person in the room. She spoke with a calm firmness, reminding everyone of the seriousness of the proceedings. Her tone was steady and patient, as if she were addressing children, yet firm enough to make it clear that she would not tolerate disruption. She explained the rules of the courtroom, the responsibilities of the jury, and the importance of focusing on the evidence. Every word reinforced the authority she carried naturally, without needing to raise her voice or act aggressively. Some people in the gallery shifted in their seats, feeling a mixture of relief and admiration. They had seen what could have been an embarrassing and tense interruption turn into a lesson in professionalism. The judge had handled it in a way that allowed the courtroom to regain its focus without humiliating anyone unnecessarily. Even the attorney representing the complainant appeared to relax slightly, grateful that the court's dignity had been maintained. The energy in the room, while still serious, had changed direction. It was no longer tense in fear. It was focused and attentive, waiting to see the trial unfold. The officer, however, was not done. His frustration simmered beneath the surface. Every few moments he would glance at the judge as if waiting for a moment of weakness. He tried to reassert himself subtly, clearing his throat or adjusting his uniform in a way that drew attention. But the judge, maintaining her composure, paid him little notice. Her focus remained on the proceedings, her ability to stay calm in the face of provocation becoming even more apparent with each passing minute. People in the courtroom could sense that he was struggling internally, realizing that the respect he assumed was his by rank could not override the authority earned by experience, knowledge, and dignity. The case itself was emotionally charged. The allegations involved behavior that had sparked debate and anger in the community. Families, neighbors, and witnesses had come forward to testify, each with their own perspective. The courtroom listened intently as testimonies began, some voices trembling with emotion, others calm and measured. Each piece of evidence, each statement was examined closely, and the judge ensured that every voice was heard fairly, maintaining a careful balance between authority and empathy. At one point, a witness for the prosecution, a community member who had been present during the incident in question, began to recount their experience. The story was compelling, filled with emotion and tension. The officer who had interrupted earlier shifted uncomfortably, knowing that the details being revealed were further evidence of the case's seriousness. The judge listened attentively, nodding occasionally, and allowed the witness to speak fully before asking clarifying questions. Her demeanor was professional yet compassionate, making it clear that she valued truth and fairness above all else. Meanwhile, the gallery watched closely. Many were hearing these details for the first time, and there was a palpable sense of empathy in the room. People leaned forward, listening to every word, trying to understand the impact of the actions being discussed. The tension that had been created by the officer's earlier behavior was slowly giving way to a deeper engagement with the trial itself. Spectators were no longer focused solely on the confrontation. They were invested in the story being told, in the search for justice, and in the judge's ability to guide the proceedings with integrity. The officer, increasingly aware that his attempts to intimidate or disrupt had failed, seemed to grow more rigid. He shifted from foot to foot, his posture tight, his face betraying a growing realization that the courtroom no longer responded to him as he had hoped. Every glance from the judge, every subtle movement she made, reminded him that his authority in that space was limited. He had overstepped, and it was now clear to him and everyone, watching, that respect in the courtroom could not be demanded, it had to be earned. The judge continued to manage the courtroom with a mix of patience and firmness that was both commanding and reassuring. She addressed each attorney in turn, ensuring that the proceedings moved smoothly and that the trial remained focused on the evidence. Her ability to maintain control without appearing harsh or confrontational impressed everyone. Even those who had initially doubted her authority found themselves drawn into the rhythm of the courtroom, trusting that she would guide the process fairly. At several points, the officer attempted to speak or intervene, but the judge handled each attempt with subtle yet unmistakable authority. She would pause, glance at him, and continue without giving him the satisfaction of her reaction. The courtroom responded as well, with spectators and jurors alike sensing the quiet power she held. The energy in the room shifted subtly with each moment. The more she remained composed, the more the officer's attempts at disruption seemed futile. The jury, who had already observed the initial confrontation, remained alert. They were not passive witnesses. They were engaged and aware, understanding that their role was to evaluate evidence carefully and fairly. They watched not only the testimony, but also the interactions between the judge and the officer, understanding that courtroom behavior could reflect broader lessons about authority, respect, and accountability. Their quiet attentiveness reinforced the judge's position, making it clear that the courtroom as a whole supported the rules and principles she upheld. As the morning progressed, the trial began to unfold in earnest. Testimonies revealed more details about the events in question, and the judge guided the proceedings with a firm yet empathetic hand. She asked pointed questions when necessary, clarified details for the jury, and ensured that all sides were given the opportunity to present their case. Her calm demeanor remained unchanged, even as the officer's presence loomed as a quiet reminder of the earlier disruption. Spectators were captivated. They watched not just for the drama of the case, but for the way the courtroom operated under her leadership. The combination of professionalism, fairness, and quiet authority created an atmosphere that was both engaging and reassuring. People were drawn into the story being told, and they could see in real time how integrity and composure could transform a tense situation into a demonstration of leadership. At one point, a witness for the defense, a young officer who had been present during the incident, took the stand. His testimony was hesitant at first, as he clearly understood the gravity of speaking in front of a courtroom and the judge's commanding presence. The judge asked him questions calmly, allowing him to explain his perspective fully while gently steering him to remain on topic. Her skill in managing the flow of information kept the courtroom focused, ensuring that every piece of evidence was heard without distraction or delay. Throughout this process, the officer who had earlier interrupted remained a presence, but increasingly a subdued one. His earlier confidence had dissipated, replaced by a cautious awareness that his behavior had consequences. Each time he considered speaking or acting, he seemed to weigh the consequences and decide against it. The room, once on edge because of his interruption, now moved past him, focusing on the unfolding trial and the evidence being presented. The gallery and the jury responded to the judge's leadership. People were quietly impressed by her ability to remain in control, to manage the courtroom's energy, and to ensure fairness. Even those who had initially doubted her authority began to understand that respect was not a matter of rank or title alone. It was demonstrated through competence, fairness, and the ability to remain calm under pressure. The judge embodied these qualities, and the courtroom reflected that understanding in every tense pause, every quiet exchange of glances, and every careful observation of the proceedings. By midday, the morning's events had set the stage for the rest of the trial. The initial interruption, while startling, had become part of the story that everyone in the courtroom would remember. It highlighted the judge's professionalism, the importance of patience and composure, and the consequences of attempting to undermine authority without understanding the depth of respect required. The officer's behavior had inadvertently emphasized the strength of the judge, turning a moment of tension into a lesson for everyone present. People left the courtroom for lunch breaks with much to discuss. The conversation wasn't just about the case. It was about what had happened at the beginning, how the judge had handled the officer, and what it revealed about respect, authority, and leadership. Observers were inspired by her calm and measured response, understanding that true authority did not rely on intimidation but on knowledge, fairness, and the ability to remain composed under pressure. Even the officers assigned to the courtroom, colleagues of the one who had interrupted, seemed to take note. They understood that respect within the courtroom was earned and maintained through conduct, not assumed through uniform or position. The entire morning had reinforced the idea that decorum, patience, and professionalism were not optional. They were essential. As the courtroom emptied briefly for recess, people reflected on the events they had witnessed. The judge's handling of the situation had become a point of discussion, not for drama or scandal, but as an example of calm authority in action. The officer's challenge, though intended to disrupt, had instead amplified the judge's presence and the respect she commanded. It was a moment that would not be easily forgotten, one that would shape the perception of the trial and the principles it represented. When the court reconvened after the break, the atmosphere had settled into a focused, attentive rhythm. The lessons of the morning remained clear. Authority rooted in fairness, patience, and professionalism could withstand challenges, and respect was a currency earned through consistent behavior. The judge continued to guide the proceedings with skill, ensuring that the trial unfolded according to the rules, and that justice remained the central focus of everyone present. The officer, now visibly aware of the balance of power, remained in his position but spoke less and moved more cautiously. The courtroom had shifted its energy away from him and onto the unfolding trial. Every interaction, every observation, reinforced the idea that true authority and respect were demonstrated through actions and integrity rather than assumptions or arrogance. By the end of Part 2, the trial was firmly underway, the courtroom fully engaged in the pursuit of truth and justice. The initial confrontation had become a reference point, a moment that highlighted the contrast between intimidation and genuine authority. It was clear to everyone present that the judge had not only maintained control of the courtroom, but had done so in a way that was memorable, instructive, and deeply human. The courtroom had settled into a rhythm by the afternoon. The earlier tension from the officer's interruption had shifted into a quiet focus. Everyone present, jury, spectators, attorneys, was fully aware that this trial was more than just a legal matter. It was a reflection of respect, authority, and the power of composure under pressure. The judge sat at the bench with the same calm determination she had shown in the morning. Her presence alone seemed to guide the energy of the room, keeping conversations hushed, movements measured, and attention fixed firmly on the proceedings. The next witness was called, a woman who had been present during the incident that sparked the lawsuit. She appeared nervous, clutching a small notepad to her chest. Her eyes scanned the courtroom, lingering briefly on the officer who had caused the morning's disturbance. That glance seemed to ignite a mixture of emotions, fear, caution, and an underlying resolve to be heard. The judge noticed immediately, offering a small, reassuring nod before signaling that the witness could begin. Her demeanor had a quiet effect on everyone in the room. It gave the witness confidence without being overbearing, and it reminded the officer that decorum was non-negotiable. As the witness began recounting the events, her voice wavered slightly at first. She described the situation in detail, explaining the behavior of the officer involved in the incident and how it had affected those around her. The courtroom was silent, every word drawing in the attention of the jury and spectators alike. The judge occasionally interjected with gentle prompts to clarify points, not to intimidate, but to ensure the truth could be clearly understood. Her ability to balance authority with empathy was evident in the way the witness responded, gradually gaining confidence and speaking with more assurance. The officer, who had tried to assert control earlier, was now noticeably tense. Every time the witness described actions that reflected poorly on law enforcement, he shifted uncomfortably. He attempted to straighten his posture as if trying to reclaim some measure of dominance. But it was clear to everyone watching that the courtroom was no longer under his influence. His attempts at subtle gestures of authority were overshadowed by the judge's unwavering composure. The contrast was stark, one person relying on intimidation, the other commanding respect through presence and professionalism. The judge asked the witness to explain how the incident had impacted her personally. Her voice grew steadier as she spoke about the fear she had felt, the embarrassment of being doubted, and the sense of injustice that lingered afterward. The room remained silent, captivated by her honesty and vulnerability. The jury in particular leaned forward, absorbing every detail. They were not only listening to the facts of the case, but also to the human experience behind those facts. It was a moment that reminded everyone that the law was not just about rules, but about real people and their lives. As the testimony continued, the officer grew increasingly restless. His eyes darted around the room, perhaps hoping for support from colleagues or a sign that his authority still mattered. But the spectators, jurors, and even other officers present remained focused on the trial, not on him. The judge, aware of his shifting energy, maintained her calm gaze, never letting his presence disrupt the proceedings. Each pause, each word, subtly reinforced her control, sending a quiet message that decorum and truth were more powerful than any badge. The witness concluded her testimony with a soft but firm statement about the importance of accountability. She emphasized that actions have consequences, and that those in positions of authority must always be held to the standards they are sworn to uphold. Her words resonated deeply in the courtroom. Some spectators whispered quietly to one another, reflecting on the courage it took to speak openly. Others simply nodded, understanding that this trial was more than just legal procedure. It was a reflection of integrity, justice, and the human cost of misconduct. The judge then turned her attention to the officer, giving him the opportunity to respond if necessary, but doing so in a way that did not allow for confrontation. Her questions were precise, designed to clarify facts, not provoke arguments. The officer answered cautiously, aware that any misstep could further diminish his credibility. He had realized, slowly and painfully, that the courtroom would no longer tolerate displays of arrogance or disrespect. Every attempt he made to regain control was met with a steady calm that reinforced the judge's authority. After the officer's brief testimony, the attorneys began presenting evidence. Documents were submitted, photos displayed, and videos shown. The courtroom remained attentive, the energy now focused entirely on the details of the case rather than on personalities. The judge guided the proceedings with a measured hand, ensuring that evidence was examined thoroughly, witnesses were questioned respectfully, and the jury could follow the facts without distraction. Her role as a facilitator and protector of the process became increasingly apparent with each passing moment. Throughout the afternoon, the gallery and jury were drawn deeper into the unfolding story. They saw not only the specifics of the incident but also the broader implications, how individuals in authority could impact lives, and how courage, fairness, and calm leadership could restore balance. The judge's ability to manage the courtroom, especially in light of the earlier interruption, became a lesson in itself. Every glance, every pause, every carefully chosen word reinforced the importance of respect, patience, and integrity. At one point, a second witness took the stand. He was hesitant, clearly nervous about the formality of the courtroom and the presence of law enforcement officers. The judge's calm demeanor reassured him, and her careful questioning helped him provide clear and coherent testimony. He described the fear and uncertainty that had accompanied the incident, explaining how it affected not just him, but those around him. The courtroom listened intently, understanding that this was not simply about legal procedure. It was about human experiences, the impact of actions, and the responsibility of those in power. The officer who had interrupted earlier shifted in his seat as the testimony continued. It was evident that the repeated accounts of misconduct, coupled with the judge's unwavering focus, were challenging his confidence. He had hoped to regain some measure of control through subtle gestures or expressions, But the courtroom no longer responded to him in the same way. The energy had shifted, respect was no longer optional, and the judge had firmly established the boundaries of what was acceptable. The judge, aware of the subtle dynamics at play, continued to maintain her composure. She guided each witness carefully, asked clarifying questions when necessary, and ensured that the jury understood the context and implications of each statement. Her presence was a steadying force, reminding everyone that the courtroom's purpose was truth and justice, not power struggles or displays of intimidation. Her approach emphasized fairness and professionalism, setting a tone that resonated throughout the room. As the afternoon wore on, the gallery became more engaged. People whispered quietly to one another, reflecting on the courage of the witnesses and the authority of the judge. Some spectators noted how the officer's attempts to dominate had been completely neutralized by the judge's calm presence. Others were struck by the human element, the way fear, courage, and resilience played out in real time, and how individuals could make a difference by standing firm in their values. The jury, meanwhile, remained focused, absorbing both the evidence and the courtroom dynamics. They observed how the judge handled each interaction with precision and care. Her ability to maintain authority without aggression was a silent demonstration of leadership and fairness. The officer's earlier attempts to challenge her were now a background element, overshadowed by the trial's unfolding narrative and the weight of truth being presented. During a brief pause, the judge addressed the courtroom, emphasizing the importance of staying focused on the case and the evidence. Her words reminded everyone that while the earlier confrontation had been noteworthy, the trial's purpose was to uncover facts and ensure justice. The gallery responded with quiet nods and murmurs of agreement, recognizing the wisdom in her guidance. The officer, now subdued, sat quietly, aware that any further disruption would not only be futile, but could also have consequences. The second witness completed his testimony, and the attorneys began summarizing key points for the jury. The judge listened carefully, occasionally asking for clarification or additional details. Her attention to the process, combined with her calm handling of the earlier confrontation, reinforced the credibility and seriousness of the trial. Every participant in the courtroom, witnesses, spectators, attorneys, and jurors, was now fully engaged, focused on the pursuit of truth and justice. The officer, once a disruptive presence, now seemed diminished in stature. His earlier confidence had been replaced by caution and awareness. He had come to realize that respect in the courtroom could not be assumed or demanded. It had to be earned through conduct, professionalism, and adherence to rules. The judge had demonstrated all of these qualities, and the courtroom's response had reinforced them. The dynamic between intimidation and authority had shifted completely, with clarity, fairness, and composure prevailing. As the day continued, the trial progressed smoothly. Witnesses were questioned, evidence was examined, and the jury took careful notes. The gallery remained attentive, understanding that each moment was part of a larger story about accountability, fairness, and the human impact of decisions. The judge's leadership had created an environment where the focus was on truth and justice, rather than conflict or personal agendas. Her presence ensured that the proceedings remained orderly, professional, and engaging. By late afternoon, it was clear that the morning's interruption had transformed from a moment of tension into a defining aspect of the trial. The officer's attempt to disrupt had inadvertently highlighted the judge's authority and professionalism. Spectators, jurors, and even law enforcement officers present had witnessed a demonstration of calm power, fairness, and integrity. The courtroom had become a stage where respect and authority were earned through conduct, not assumed through position or intimidation. As the proceedings wrapped up for the day, people left the courtroom quietly, many reflecting on the events they had witnessed. Conversations centered not only on the evidence, but also on the judge's handling of the officer and the courtroom as a whole. Her calm, firm, and empathetic approach had left a lasting impression. The officer, meanwhile, remained as a quiet reminder that authority without respect was fragile, and that true leadership required patience, fairness, and the courage to maintain composure under pressure. The courtroom had settled into a steady rhythm, but there was an underlying tension that hadn't disappeared. Everyone could feel it, the kind of tension that comes from knowing that something important was about to happen. The judge had guided the proceedings with a calm and steady hand throughout the morning and afternoon, and her quiet authority was now fully established. Yet the presence of the officer who had interrupted the opening remarks still hung in the room like a shadow, a reminder of the earlier confrontation. The trial was moving toward the crucial stage. The jury was about to hear evidence that could sway their decision, and the witnesses who had already spoken had set the scene. Their testimonies had been emotional and compelling, filled with personal experiences, fear, and courage. Each story revealed not only facts but also the human impact of actions that were under scrutiny. The courtroom was silent as everyone waited for the next witness, a sense of anticipation hanging in the air. When the next person was called to testify, it was someone who had been directly involved in the incident and had witnessed the behavior of the officer in question. The witness walked slowly to the stand, hands slightly trembling, and took a deep breath before beginning. The gallery watched closely, the jury leaning forward in their seats, and the judge nodded gently to encourage them. It was a moment that demanded attention, and everyone seemed to understand that what would be said next could change the course of the trial. The witness began recounting the events in detail, their voice steady but filled with emotion. They described how the actions of the officer had caused confusion and fear, not only for themselves but for those around them. The courtroom listened intently, every eye fixed on the witness as the story unfolded. There were pauses, moments when the witness had to compose themselves, and the judge offered subtle cues of encouragement, maintaining a calm and supportive presence. The energy in the room was electric, a mix of tension, empathy, and anticipation. The officer who had caused the morning's disruption shifted in his seat, clearly uncomfortable. He had come into the courtroom expecting to command attention and assert dominance, but the proceedings had revealed that respect could not be assumed. Every witness, every piece of evidence, and every word of the judge reinforced the idea that authority in this space was earned through fairness, professionalism, and integrity. His earlier confidence was waning, replaced by a growing awareness that he had underestimated the courtroom, the judge, and the people involved. As the testimony continued, the witness described specific moments when the officer had acted inappropriately, making decisions that affected the safety and dignity of those present. Their words were careful, deliberate, and honest, painting a vivid picture of the incident without exaggeration or unnecessary drama. The jury took careful notes, absorbing every detail, while the spectators sat in hushed silence, drawn into the unfolding story. The judge listened intently, occasionally asking clarifying questions, guiding the testimony to ensure clarity and accuracy. The courtroom was a mix of focus and anticipation. Every participant, from the jury to the gallery, understood the significance of the moment. The judge had maintained authority through the earlier interruption, but now the real test was how the courtroom would respond to the cumulative evidence and testimonies. The officer, once confident in his assumed control, was becoming increasingly aware that the room was aligned against attempts to intimidate or disrupt the process. Respect was now firmly established, and the dynamics had shifted. The judge addressed the officer directly at one point, asking for a statement about the events described by the witness. She did so calmly, without anger or accusation, simply requesting factual clarification. The officer spoke cautiously, his words measured and deliberate, but there was an unmistakable hesitation, a sense that he understood the weight of the situation. His attempts to assert control were subdued, overshadowed by the courtroom's focus on truth and justice. The gallery and jury were attentive, recognizing the significance of his restrained response. As the testimony progressed, the judge skillfully balanced authority with empathy. She ensured that the witness felt safe and respected, while also maintaining control of the courtroom. Her ability to manage the dynamics in the room became increasingly apparent. Every word, every gesture, and every pause reinforced her role not just as a judge, but as a leader capable of guiding people through tension, emotion, and uncertainty. The officer's earlier behavior now seemed almost irrelevant compared to the strength of her presence. The jury's attention was unwavering. They observed not only the evidence being presented, but also the interactions within the courtroom. The way the judge maintained order, the careful questioning of witnesses, and the officer's gradual recognition of his misplaced authority all contributed to a broader understanding of fairness and accountability. Each juror absorbed the details and the dynamics, realizing that the trial was not just about isolated actions, but about principles, ethics, and responsibility. The gallery, too, was deeply engaged. Spectators whispered quietly to one another, noting how the judge had transformed what could have been a chaotic situation into a display of calm authority. People admired her ability to remain composed under pressure, to balance empathy with control, and to ensure that every participant in the courtroom, witnesses, attorneys, jury, and even the disruptive officer, was treated fairly and with respect. The atmosphere, once tense and uncertain, now felt guided and purposeful. At one point, the witness described a moment when the officer had tried to intimidate others in the room, believing that his rank would allow him to dominate. The jury's reaction was subtle but telling. Some jurors exchanged glances, others shook their heads slightly, and a few scribbled notes in their pads. The collective body language was a quiet but unmistakable sign of disapproval. The officer, noticing this reaction, paled slightly, realizing that the jury was fully aware of his behavior and was judging it accordingly. The shift in perception was palpable. His authority in the courtroom had been effectively neutralized. The judge, recognizing the significance of the moment, allowed the witness to continue uninterrupted. She maintained a calm and composed demeanor, reinforcing the integrity of the proceedings. The officer, meanwhile, became quieter, his presence less assertive as the courtroom's focus remained on the unfolding testimonies and evidence. Every subtle reaction from the jury and gallery reminded him that respect and authority were not automatically granted. They had to be earned through conduct and professionalism. The witness concluded their testimony with a heartfelt statement about the importance of accountability and the impact of authority figures' actions on ordinary people. Their words resonated throughout the courtroom, leaving a quiet but powerful impression. The jury nodded in understanding. The spectators reflected silently, and even the officer seemed to grasp the gravity of what had been presented. The moment was not marked by drama or shouting, but by the collective recognition of fairness, integrity, and responsibility. Following the testimony, the judge provided instructions to the jury, emphasizing the importance of impartiality, careful consideration, and the focus on facts. Her words were measured, clear, and firm, reinforcing the standards of the courtroom while maintaining a tone that was accessible and human. The jury responded with attentive silence, absorbing the guidance and preparing for the next phase of the trial. The officer, who had been a disruptive force earlier, now seemed almost invisible in contrast to the judge's commanding presence. His earlier attempts at asserting dominance had been replaced by caution and awareness. Every action he took was measured, as he realized that the courtroom's focus was no longer on him but on justice. The contrast between his behavior and the judge's composure highlighted a broader lesson for everyone present. True authority comes from fairness, professionalism, and the ability to lead with integrity. As the trial moved forward, the next witness took the stand. This person had not been present during the initial incident, but had relevant knowledge and observations. Their testimony provided context, reinforcing the patterns of behavior under scrutiny. The gallery and jury listened carefully, the judge guiding the proceedings with the same calm precision. Every question she asked was designed to ensure clarity, fairness, and focus, allowing the witness to provide accurate and complete information. The officer remained present, but his earlier confidence was gone. He appeared increasingly aware of how the jury and spectators perceived him, and his behavior was restrained. The judge, maintaining her steady presence, allowed the courtroom dynamics to speak for themselves. Respect, integrity, and professionalism were now the dominant forces, effectively neutralizing the earlier attempt at intimidation. Throughout the afternoon, the courtroom absorbed the testimonies, documents, and evidence. The focus remained on accountability, fairness, and truth. The judge's handling of the proceedings reinforced the lessons of the morning, that authority earned through integrity and professionalism outweighed any assumptions of power based on rank alone. The officer's previous behavior, once disruptive, had become a silent reminder of this principle. By mid-afternoon, the jury's collective awareness was evident. They had witnessed the officer's inappropriate behavior, the judge's calm and authoritative response, and the detailed testimonies of witnesses. Their body language, facial expressions, and attentive note-taking reflected a growing understanding of the case and the principles at stake. The courtroom, once filled with tension, now felt purposeful and focused. The judge had transformed potential chaos into clarity, guiding everyone toward fairness and truth. The final witness for the day was called. This person had first-hand knowledge of how the incident had affected the community and provided insight into the broader implications of the officer's behavior. They spoke with honesty, vulnerability, and courage, drawing empathy from the gallery and thoughtful consideration from the jury. The officer, listening to this testimony, seemed to shrink further into his seat, fully aware that the courtroom's judgment extended beyond just legal rules. It included moral awareness and human impact. As the day drew toward its conclusion, the judge summarized the proceedings for the jury. She reminded them of the importance of impartiality, careful deliberation, and attention to both evidence and testimony. Her tone was calm yet firm, reinforcing the principles that had guided the entire trial. The jury listened carefully, fully engaged, and clearly affected by both the evidence and the courtroom dynamics they had observed. The officer, who had started the day confident and disruptive, left the courtroom pale and subdued. The jury's reactions throughout the day had spoken volumes, and the collective weight of observation, testimony, and authority had left him with no room for challenge. His earlier assumptions about power and respect had been thoroughly dismantled by the judge's composure and the courtroom's engagement with justice and fairness. By the end of Part 4, it was clear that the day had marked a turning point. The jury had witnessed not only the evidence but also a powerful lesson in authority, respect, and professionalism. The courtroom had shifted from tension and uncertainty to focus and engagement. Every participant, witnesses, spectators, and even the officer, had been shaped by the events of the day. The judge's leadership, calm authority, and unwavering professionalism had set the stage for the final resolution of the trial, demonstrating that integrity, patience, and composure could overcome arrogance and intimidation. The final day of the trial had arrived, and the courtroom was thick with anticipation. People filled the seats early, whispering quietly to one another, their eyes occasionally flicking to the judge at the bench. She had guided the proceedings with calm authority throughout the trial, earning respect from witnesses, attorneys, spectators, and even the officer whose behavior had sparked tension on the first day. The courtroom atmosphere felt different now, focused, serious, and expectant, as everyone knew that the jury would soon reach a verdict. The judge entered the courtroom, her presence commanding immediate attention. She greeted the room politely, then settled into her role with the same calm precision that had defined the entire trial. The jury, already seated and attentive, seemed prepared for the gravity of the moment. Each juror's eyes were focused, reflecting the responsibility they carried. Outside the courtroom, cameras and reporters waited for updates, but inside the energy was controlled, respectful, and concentrated on the proceedings at hand. The attorneys delivered their closing statements, summarizing the evidence, the witness testimonies, and the larger implications of the case. Their words were deliberate, meant to clarify points for the jury and to emphasize the significance of the trial. The judge listened attentively, occasionally nodding slightly, signaling that her focus remained on ensuring a fair process. She was the quiet anchor of the courtroom, her presence reminding everyone that decorum, fairness, and respect were the foundation of justice. The officer who had caused the initial disruption sat quietly throughout the proceedings, no longer attempting to assert authority. Each glance from the jury, each subtle reaction from the gallery reminded him that his earlier confidence had been misplaced. The courtroom had shifted, and it was now clear that professionalism, calmness, and integrity were far more powerful than intimidation. He adjusted his uniform nervously, realizing that his actions and behavior had been fully observed and silently judged throughout the trial. Once the closing statements were completed, the judge addressed the jury directly. She reminded them of their duty to deliberate fairly, consider the evidence carefully, and base their decisions solely on the facts presented in the courtroom. Her tone was calm and measured, emphasizing the seriousness of their responsibility without adding pressure. The jury listened attentively, absorbing her guidance, and nodded in acknowledgement. Her words carried weight, not because of force, but because of the authority she had earned through her conduct and fairness. The jury was then excused to begin deliberations. The courtroom emptied slowly, leaving only the essential personnel and the judge. Outside, spectators and reporters exchanged quiet conversations, speculating about what the verdict might be and reflecting on the trial's events. Inside, the atmosphere remained tense but controlled. The courtroom itself seemed to hold its breath, waiting for the decision that would bring resolution to the case. The jury deliberated for hours. They examined the evidence carefully, discussed the testimonies in detail, and considered the human impact described by the witnesses. Each juror brought their perspective, weighing the facts against principles of fairness, accountability, and justice. The testimony of the witnesses, the calm authority of the judge, and the officer's earlier inappropriate behavior all played a role in shaping their discussions. It was clear that they took their responsibility seriously, understanding the broader significance of the trial. During this time, the judge remained in her chambers, reviewing notes, preparing instructions, and maintaining readiness to guide the jury as needed. She had seen trials reach verdicts in many ways, but this one had been particularly charged, not only because of the evidence but because of the lessons in authority, respect, and professionalism that had unfolded in the courtroom. Every interaction over the past days had contributed to a deeper understanding of the human side of justice, and she knew the jury would carry these observations into their deliberations. Finally, after hours of discussion, the jury returned to the courtroom. Their faces reflected seriousness and contemplation. The judge invited the foreperson to speak, and the room held an expectant silence. The gallery, filled with spectators and members of the press, leaned forward slightly, sensing that a defining moment had arrived. The foreperson stood and spoke clearly, announcing the verdict with careful deliberation. The verdict was delivered, and the room reacted in subtle but noticeable ways. Some spectators exhaled, their tension dissipating. Others nodded quietly, acknowledging the fairness and thoughtfulness of the decision. The judge maintained her calm demeanor, absorbing the moment with measured professionalism. She recognized the significance of the jury's response, not just for the case itself, but for the broader lesson it represented about respect, integrity, and accountability. The officer who had once interrupted the courtroom with confidence now looked pale and unsettled. The jury's reaction to his behavior, combined with the weight of the evidence, had left a mark on him. He had entered the courtroom believing that rank and position would automatically grant him respect, but he had learned, publicly and with subtle clarity, that authority earned through integrity and professionalism could not be undermined by arrogance or disruption. His quiet presence now underscored the contrast between intimidation and genuine leadership. The judge addressed the courtroom once more, thanking the jury for their careful deliberation and explaining the importance of their decision in maintaining the integrity of the legal process. Her words were clear, human, and empathetic. She recognized the courage of the witnesses, the responsibility of the jury, and the attention of the spectators, reinforcing the principles that had guided the trial from beginning to end. Every word carried the weight of experience and the quiet authority of someone who understood both law and humanity. The witnesses who had shared their experiences with courage were acknowledged by the judge. She commended them for their honesty, patience, and willingness to speak truthfully in the face of difficult circumstances. Their presence, their voices, and their stories had shaped the trial and influenced the jury's understanding of accountability and responsibility. It was a moment of quiet affirmation, showing that human courage and integrity could guide justice as much as the law itself. Spectators in the gallery reflected on the events of the trial. Many had come with curiosity, some with skepticism, but all left with a sense of respect for the process and the people involved. They had witnessed the power of calm authority, the importance of professionalism, and the influence of integrity on both the courtroom and human perception. The judge's composure, the jury's careful consideration, and the witness's courage combined to create a narrative that extended beyond the legal case itself. The officer, finally realizing the depth of what had occurred, remained seated quietly. His earlier confidence, which had once been so visible, was now replaced with introspection. He had been observed, evaluated, and ultimately reminded that respect and authority were earned, not demanded. The courtroom had demonstrated, through every subtle gesture and every clear instruction, that conduct mattered more than rank, and integrity outweighed arrogance. As the trial concluded, the judge formally closed the proceedings. Her voice remained calm and firm, echoing through the now quiet courtroom. She reminded everyone that the law was not only a set of rules, but a framework for fairness, accountability, and justice. The significance of the trial extended beyond the case at hand, serving as a lesson for those present about respect, professionalism, and human responsibility. The courtroom, once filled with tension and uncertainty, now radiated a sense of closure, reflection, and measured satisfaction. Outside the courthouse, the story of the trial spread quickly. Media outlets reported not only on the verdict, but on the courtroom dynamics, the judge's authority, the officer's disruption, and the jury's thoughtful response. People discussed the case in communities, reflecting on the lessons it offered about integrity, respect, and accountability. The human element, the courage of witnesses, the calm professionalism of the judge, and the subtle transformation of courtroom energy became a central theme in conversations and commentary. In the end, the trial left a lasting impression on everyone involved. The judge's calm and measured authority had guided the process from start to finish, ensuring that justice was served with dignity and fairness. The jury had demonstrated careful deliberation, balancing facts with human understanding. Witnesses had shown courage and honesty, allowing their experiences to inform the decision-making process. And the officer, through his discomfort and subdued presence, had learned an important lesson about the difference between assumed authority and genuine respect. The courthouse emptied slowly, leaving behind the echoes of a trial that had been about more than legal arguments. It had been a study in human behavior, accountability, and the power of composure. Those who had witnessed the events carried away lessons in respect, professionalism, and the importance of maintaining integrity under pressure. The courtroom had become a place where justice was not only served but also taught through example. By the time the doors closed for the day, it was clear that the trial would be remembered for more than just its legal outcome. It had highlighted the importance of calm authority, human courage, and accountability. The judge's leadership had transformed a potentially tense and chaotic situation into a demonstration of professionalism and fairness. The jury's careful deliberation had reinforced the principle that justice is achieved through thoughtful consideration, not haste or influence. And the human stories that had emerged from the witness stand had reminded everyone of the real impact of actions on people's lives. As people left the courthouse, there was a shared sense of closure and reflection. Conversations focused on fairness, integrity, and human responsibility. The officer, now quietly aware of the lessons he had witnessed firsthand, left with a recognition that respect cannot be demanded. It must be earned through conduct, professionalism, and integrity. The judge, witnesses, jury, and spectators had all played a part in creating a moment that would resonate far beyond the walls of the courtroom. The trial concluded not with drama or chaos, but with a quiet affirmation of the values that underpin the legal system: fairness, accountability, and human dignity. The judge's calm authority, the jury's thoughtful response, and the courage of those who testified had combined to create a story that was both inspiring and instructive. It was a reminder that in moments of challenge and tension, integrity and composure are far more powerful than intimidation or arrogance. By the end of the day, the courtroom was empty, but the impact of the trial lingered. People would talk about it for weeks, reflecting on the lessons learned and the examples set. The verdict was just one part of the story. The real significance lay in the demonstration of human courage, calm authority, and the importance of respecting the principles of fairness and accountability. The courtroom had witnessed a defining moment, one that showed the power of integrity and professionalism to guide justice and human understanding.